Welcome into the 49ers Report by Chat Sports. I'm your host, Chase Sr. NFL Week 6 in the books, in San Francisco suffering a really ugly loss to the Atlanta Falcons by a final score of 28-14. And I understand that San Francisco was injury depleted in this game. They basically had to go with their second-string defensive line. And in the secondary, without Emmanuel Mosley, they had to include some reinforcements in the secondary. But even though the Niners were down in this game in terms of their roster and in terms of suffering a lot of injuries, there's really no excuse for going down to an Atlanta Falcons team that really is mediocre at best. I thought that going into this game, San Francisco had the depth to win this football game, to make it 3 consecutive wins in a row, to push their record to 4-2 on the season going into the gauntlet of their 2022 schedule, which upcoming features the Kansas City Chiefs next week at Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara. The week after that against the Los Angeles Rams. And going to 4-2, much different now than falling to 3-3, where very easily going up against a potent offense in Kansas City in a Super Bowl rematch of that 2019 season, where you fall to 3-4, and once again, just like last year, San Francisco really has to climb their way out of a bad and ugly early season start to the season. And really now, San Francisco, they still might be the favorites to win the NFC West. And they might still have a golden opportunity to make the NFC playoffs. But the point here being, they're making their job of making the playoffs a lot more difficult with a loss like this to Atlanta. We're going to react to it coming up. We're going to take your calls as well. First, though, I want to hear from you in the comment section right now. Your one-word reaction to today's loss. I want you to get creative and let me know that one-word reaction right now in the comment section down below. For me, the one-word reaction comes down to brutal. This is a brutal loss for San Francisco. And really, it started in the early portion of this football game, where the Falcons, on the opening drive of the game, set the tone. 11 plays, 74 yards. Michael Pruitt with the touchdown catch from Marcus Mariota, Marcus Mariota, by the way, today, 13 of 14, 129 yards and 2 touchdowns. And it's pretty fitting that Michael Pruitt scored that touchdown because he was with the Niners early last year throughout training camp. He was let go. He's been an NFL journeyman. For him, though, to score that tutty probably felt very good for him. And then you continue to really dissect this football game. Niners' first drive of the game, they have to punt early, 3 and out. Second drive, Jeff Wilson on a 3rd and 1. You're trying to establish momentum. He coughs the football up for a scoop and score that goes back to the house. And already, you're down 14-0 before you can even blink in this game. Now, the Niners did a good job of climbing back out of that hole and making it 14-14. But after the recess break, the Niners outscored in this game. The Niners did not do anything offensively. They did not put a single point on the board. And you cannot play behind the 8 ball in a trap game like this. You cannot give the football up. Jimmy Garoppolo, 2 interceptions. Jeff Wilson with that fumble. You can't afford the opposition opportunity to breathe. And the Atlanta Falcons throughout this year have been a sneaky, solid team because they've covered the spread in all 5 games this year. But when you turn the football over, when you drop passes like Charlie Warner did and Ray McCloud did, which could have been complexion-changing plays, that is a recipe for disaster. That is a recipe for failure, especially when you're without multiple playmakers along the defensive line, and you're without your number 2 cornerback in Emmanuel Mosley, and then you go down Charvarius Ward, who did not come back for the second half because of that groin injury, and then you're missing your right tackle in Mike McGlinchey. Look, you can look at this a couple of ways. I understand how San Francisco was injury-riddled in this football game. And it was tough going up against a Falcons team that's been feisty. But you have more depth. You're the better coached team. You're the better roster. You can't go down and turn the football over and be sloppy like Jake Brendel was with a couple of those penalties, with a couple of those game-altering plays like the Niners were today. And now you're looking straight down the barrel at a 3-4 start with the Kansas City Chiefs coming to town next week against the Niners. We're going to continue to break this game down and take your calls because I know a lot of people have a lot of things to say. First, though, make sure you sign up with our sportsbook partner, BetUS, all year, offering a 125% deposit bonus if you head to chatsports.com/49bet and enter the promo code Niners125. You put in $100, you get $125 back in free money to game with. NFL season is in play. Major League Baseball playoffs have been epic. The college football slate yesterday was crazy. You can also bet on the NBA season, which is starting on Tuesday. Chatsports.com/49bet, promo code Niners125 for that 125% deposit bonus. All right, let's start to take your calls here on the 49ers Report by Chat Sports because we're live here on YouTube, we're live here on Callin, and a lot of people have a lot to say about this brutal Niners loss. Again, the injuries are one thing, but to come out knowing that and to really fall into the trap game hysteria is just something that championship teams don't do. And I was pumped up about the Niners coming back from that 14-0 deficit. I had guaranteed on our watch party that the Niners were going to be able to come back, and they did. But good teams find a way to win that football game. And the Niners, really all across the board, offense, defense, special teams, did not do the necessary things to win this football game. So to start off our post-game show on the Call-In app, I'm going to make Draco our first caller because I know Draco is going to bring the heat. Draco, what do you got for me following that very frustrating loss? TOA, man. Draco, are you there? I'm not hearing you, Draco.
Can you hear me?
I got you now, Draco. What's up, man?
No, I'm talking now.
You're good, bro.
I'm on the phone. Yeah, that was horrible, bro. The offensive line, that was horrible. I just sat there and watched the offensive line roll on the floor, ain't touch nobody. That was horrible. I seen Jimmy throw 2 interceptions. That was horrible. I'm seeing that our defense not stopping the run. That's horrible. Hey, we seen a lot of stuff that was horrible, but I guess we had people open. We had very like, yeah, I can't make no excuses. It's just horrible. I just know when Trey come back, he gonna be throwing some darts. I ain't gonna say Jimmy's completely horrible, but Trey gonna throw some darts for sure. Cause you see how Marcus Mariota was able to use his legs. Jimmy can't use his legs like that. Otherwise, he would have been took off, and he's not gonna do that. But yeah, I guess it is what it is.
So, Draco, that's a good
Oh, our
call to
cornerbacks
start
went
things
down.
off, right? Because Draco had said, horrible, horrible, horrible. It's a horrible loss. And this is a game that the Niners need to win if they want to improve their playoff positioning, to improve their playoff seeding, and to take advantage of a mediocre to bad to non-playoff team. The Atlanta Falcons, even though they've covered the spread in all 6 games now this regular season, are not a playoff caliber team. San Francisco has Super Bowl aspirations, and you had a golden opportunity, again, despite the injuries, to move your record to 4-2 going into Kansas City next week. And you had the luxury of maybe losing that game to go to 4-3 with the Rams upcoming. Now you're at 3-3. You fall to 3-4, and things get a little bit more hairy in the NFC. Now, the good thing and the luxury for the Niners is that this NFC West appears to be wide open. But I thought Draco made some really good points on top of what he said, this just being a bad loss. San Francisco's offensive line was not good today. They could not run the football, and they couldn't establish that ground game. Going up against a Falcons team that going into this matchup was one of the worst against the ground in the NFL. And then also, with the 49ers defense, they've been the number 1 overall defensive unit in the NFL. But at some point, the Niners offense had to bail them out. Now, they did so to a certain degree last week, but by scoring 30 points, that's great and all against a bad Panthers team. You still had that Emmanuel Mosley pick 6. And the Niners really missed Emmanuel Mosley today, by the way. But if you look at how the Niners were kind of broken down in this game, 50 rushing yards to the Falcons, 168. The offensive line was bad for the run and against the pass. And for this defense, they were bad against the ground game as well. I mean, 4.2 yards per rush, giving up 21 points because that scoop and score was 21 offensive points, 7 points for their defense. At some point, the Niners offense had to come through and carry the defense because they've been so great and elite this year, and they weren't able to do that. And you need a balanced approach. And the Niners didn't have that today in a game in which they really, really needed it. All right, we're going to continue to take your calls here on our post-game show. First, though, make sure you subscribe to the channel on Callin as well as YouTube. We're giving you videos every single day, news, rumors, analysis, informative, entertaining coverage. Lock us in by hitting that red subscribe button right now. Excited to go to Mark. Mark, what do you got for me here, and what is your reaction to this loss for San Francisco?
Dude, so I got a couple points. I'm so pissed right now. So you mentioned, or actually I mentioned this in your weekly show earlier this week. I'm words of wisdom too. So
I got you.
anyways,
You're an OG.
The training room, dude. Why do we have so many damn injuries at key positions over the last, I would say the last 2 to 3 years? I mean, when your training room becomes a liability, you got some serious problems. You look around the NFL and look, our whole D-line was pretty much out, right? That's one huge liability right there. Another point I want to make, and I know it's kind of an overreaction, I'm emotional and pissed off right now, is why was Kittle targeted for that play over the middle and where Warner dropped it? It might be worth shopping him at this point before the trade deadline for some draft capital next year or some help this year. Because, dude, look at him. He hasn't done nothing. And I know he's been hurt. I get that. But that also points back to my aforementioned point of the training room. Okay. Lastly, dude, you mentioned it. Championship teams find a way to win. The Niners are turning into the Cowboys of the NFC West, at least this year. A lot of talent, but they can't close the deal, and they're inconsistent, dude. And that points to coaching. And I get it, bro. I know you like Kyle Shanahan. That's cool. But when you don't get your team ready like this, against his former team, too, they showed him up. They showed him up. And how could he fall for a trap game like that, man? We got KC next week. We're going to get their butts handed to us. So, I'm sorry, man. I'm pissed. I said it in the chat. The Niners are fool's gold this year, man. And I'm tired of it. And I know everyone else is. But, I'm bringing those points, man. I guess you could say I'm whining, but to me, they're valid points, bro. And that's all I got to say.
Mark, that's a great call. And never apologize for being honest. Never apologize for being raw. Never apologize for anything that you said, because we appreciate the raw reaction from the faithful after a game like this. Now, let's get to a couple of the things that you talked about. George Kittle, in my opinion, in the last 2 weeks has looked pretty solid. He did admit this past week that the last 2 weeks he's felt about as close to normal as he's been, suffering from that groin injury. This is what I look for George Kittle. And the Niners aren't able to utilize him as much in the passing game because Trent Williams is out. So keep in mind that Kyle Shanahan has full trust and has so much faith and value in him as a blocker in the pass game and the run game. But the last 2 weeks, I actually think that George Kittle has been pretty solid. And a lot of people are talking about him being out of his prime. I actually think that George Kittle is playing pretty good football right now. If you watch the way that he's barreling through defenders and carrying defenders, that is the vintage George Kittle. Unfortunately for all of us, we want to see him utilized like Travis Kelce in the pass game. That's to Kyle Shanahan for not utilizing him. in that fashion, it also comes down to being without Trent Williams and then Mike McGlinchey, where you're having to use George Kittle on both sides of the line of scrimmage, outside of the left tackle and then flank to the right tackle, to use him as a blocker, which is really unfortunate because this guy going down the seam really is a special player. And honestly, you talked about that play to Charlie Warner. Like, Charlie Warner has to come down with that ball. The throw from Jimmy G was right here. For an NFL player, you got to make that going down the seam. For Ray McCloud, at the start of the second half, to drop that ball, that's like a 50-yard completion down to the opponent's 25 in which you just have to complete. So those are my issues with that. As far as Kyle Shanahan, look, I can't beat around the bush. I got to be honest, and I'll be honest with you right now. Kyle Shanahan is one of the top 10 coaches in this league when he has things working, when he has things humming, when he really is feeling it, when he's in his bag. But to lose to the Chicago Bears week 1, to lose to the Denver Broncos in week 3, to lose this game to the Atlanta Falcons in the way that they did. Look, if you lose on a game-winning field goal, that's one thing. But if you lose by 2 touchdowns, like, that's another thing. And while Shanahan has been able to right the ship after having to rebuild the Niners and put them in a position where over the last 3 years, going into this year, they've made it to a Super Bowl and an NFC Championship game. That's impressive. And I do have faith that he's going to be able to turn this ship around and to get this team primed for a good playoff run. You cannot afford to lose these types of games because it forces you to have to play catch-up from here on out, and that is not sustainable. The Niners were crushed by injuries this week, and it showed. Their pass rush couldn't get home. Marcus Mariota had a career game. He looked like the player that the Titans wanted to draft early in the draft a couple of years ago. He looked like that Heisman Trophy type of guy. Just an ugly loss, man, all around. Penalties, turnovers, not being necessarily prepared. And now you got to welcome on the Kansas City Chiefs next week. That's very difficult. Who is the most to blame for today? Is it Jimmy G? Is it somebody else? I want you to give me a name right now in the comment section. Who is the most to blame for today's loss in Week 6 against the Atlanta Falcons? Let me know. We appreciate your feedback.